For nearly 7 centuries, the samurai were the invisible backbone of Japan. They were more than warriors. They were living symbols of a nation's values, guardians of its traditions, and embodiments of discipline and honor. To be a samurai was not merely to hold a sword, but to dedicate one's entire life to a code so strict that it could shape every thought, every word, every heartbeat. That code was Bushido, the way of the warrior, and it demanded loyalty without question, courage without hesitation, and the acceptance of death without fear. From the first moments a boy could walk, he was trained to endure pain, to show no weakness, and to internalize the idea that life without honor was not truly living. Every strike of the sword, every posture, every breath carried meaning. Every samurai knew that their life could end in an instant, yet this awareness did not breed despair. It forged focus, precision, and an almost supernatural calm. Japan, for centuries, was a land shaped by these men. They policed the country, served their lords, and maintained order where chaos might have reigned. Their presence alone could stabilize a village, a province, even an entire kingdom. Wars were fought with clarity. Battles were personal, intimate, and deadly serious. Victory was a matter of skill, courage, and timing, and defeat was honorable only if faced with dignity. This was a world in which patience and discipline were more potent than brute strength, and in which generations of samurai proved that mastery of the sword was a form of poetry. To fall in battle was tragic but noble. To live without purpose was disgrace. But the world beyond Japan's shores was evolving in ways that no sword could anticipate. Across distant seas, nations were inventing weapons that ignored courage, valor, or lineage. When Portuguese traders first arrived on Japanese beaches in the mid-16th century, they brought not only spices and fabrics, but fire and thunder, firearms. At first, these crude muskets seemed laughable. They were slow to reload, awkward, and unreliable. A skilled samurai could, in theory, strike 3 times with his sword before the musket even discharged. Pride and tradition made them dismiss the new weapons. Honor still mattered more than speed, more than technology. Yet war does not reward pride for long. Guns evolved, grew more accurate, more powerful. Armor that had deflected arrows for centuries could not stop a bullet. A man with no formal training could kill from a distance, unseen, untouchable. Entire battles began to favor efficiency over courage, calculation over skill. Samurai commanders watched as centuries of mastery, of lived discipline, began to falter against the cold inevitability of a bullet. What had once been the domain of honor was now dominated by technology. The battlefield was no longer a stage for bravery but a machine of inevitability. And the samurai, who had always been masters of their world, felt it slipping through their fingers. By the 19th century, Japan faced pressures unlike any before. Foreign powers demanded trade. Isolation was no longer viable. To survive, the nation had to modernize, and modernization meant tearing down the old structures. The Meiji Restoration returned the emperor to power and dissolved feudal domains. Samurai stipends were eliminated. Carrying a sword in public became illegal. The very class that had defined Japan for centuries was suddenly unnecessary, irrelevant. Imagine dedicating your life to a code of honor, training since childhood to be a protector, only to be told that your role, your purpose, and the weapons that defined your very existence were forbidden. Some samurai adapted. They traded armor for government uniforms, swords for pens. They became teachers, bureaucrats, merchants. Yet many felt hollow. A samurai without a sword was like a flame without heat, like a storm without thunder. Among those who could not reconcile with this new order was Saigō Takamori, a man whose life had been dedicated to loyalty and service. Once a hero of the new Japan, a man who had helped restore the emperor, he now watched as the class he loved was stripped of its honor. He could not accept a world where courage and discipline were no longer recognized, where the deeds of warriors could be replaced by machines and laws. And so, in 1877, he led the Satsuma Rebellion, a final stand by the samurai against the inexorable tide of modernity. This was not a rebellion meant to succeed. It was a statement, a testament to an era that refused to die quietly. Thousands of samurai followed him into battle, fully aware that rifles, artillery, and modern armies stood between them and survival. They sharpened their swords, adjusted their armor, and marched knowing that history itself was against them. And yet, they moved with determination, with dignity, with courage that refused to bow. The battles were catastrophic and tragic. Samurai charged through lines of rifle fire, their numbers dwindling with every step. One by one, men who had been trained in the art of life and death for decades fell. Yet they continued to fight, not for victory, but for the ideals they held dear. Saigō himself, despite knowing the inevitability of his fate, led from the front. When he was finally struck down, he chose ritual death over capture, ensuring that his life ended as it had been lived, with honor intact. When the smoke cleared and the cannons fell silent, Japan had changed forever. The samurai were gone, not by defeat of courage, but by the inevitability of progress. Railways crisscrossed lands once patrolled by armored warriors. Factories and modern institutions replaced castles and training grounds. Japan had entered a new age, one in which technology and efficiency dictated power. Yet the spirit of the samurai did not vanish. It seeped into legend, into story, into the hearts of those who remembered. Honor, loyalty, courage, and sacrifice lived on, preserved not by steel, but by memory. The fall of the samurai is often misread as tragedy, but it was something more profound. It was the quiet lesson that even the strongest traditions, the fiercest warriors, must eventually confront the tide of change. Those who resist blindly may perish, but the values they carry can endure. And in choosing to face the end with dignity, Saigō Takamori and the last samurai achieved a kind of immortality that no bullet, no law, and no passage of time could erase. They understood that legacy is not measured in victories but in the courage to face the impossible. To act when all odds are against you and to embrace the inevitability of change without abandoning the core of who you are. The samurai did not vanish because they were weak. They fell because the world changed around them. Yet they remain immortal in the lessons they left behind, in the stories whispered across centuries, in the inspiration they provide to anyone who dares to live with honor in a world that often forgets it. They chose the impossible path and walked it with dignity, and in that choice, they transcended mortality. Their swords may be silent, their armor long gone, but the spirit of the samurai still echoes in every act of courage, every stand for principle, and every life lived with purpose. The samurai knew the world was moving forward. They knew it would crush them. And yet, they fought anyway. In that fight lies the true essence of what it means to be immortal.